So I got a comment on my previous video on creating folders in Outlook. And the question was, what if I wanted to create multiple subfolders from an Excel spreadsheet? How would that look in the flow? Also, what would go into the compose on the true side and the pass on the false side? So in response to this question, I updated the flow I built to be able to cover the requirements as posed in the question. So to perform this action, first thing I needed to do is I have an idea of what the entire process would be. So I'm dividing it into 3 scopes. The first scope would take care of creating the main folder in the root directory. The second scope would take care of getting the list of all the folder names I want to create, while the third scope would take care of creating the subfolders as intended. So if we take a look in the Excel file here, this is a sample of the Excel file that will contain all the subfolders I want to create. So you can see here, I'm creating just 10 subfolders. It can be increased to as many as we want. So coming back here, so just as in the previous video, to create the main folder, first thing I need to do is initialize the parent folder ID, then set what I want the parent folder name to be. Then I get a list, or rather I get a list of all the folders in my Outlook directory, but I filter based on what I want the name to be. Now, what this does is, with this list, with the list gotten from the list of folders, I can use it to identify if the parent folder already exists or if it doesn't. So basically, it's going to it serves as a check to see if the folder exists or not. So if the folder exists in the condition, so if the total number of items is greater than 0, it then means that the folder it is looking for based on the filter exists. So if the folder exists, what we need to do is we need to pass the JSON response gotten from the get list of folder. When we pass it, we then extract the parent ID. So with this, we are working with an assumption that the first item in the list returned from the get list of folder is the folder we are actually looking for, because the names of folders in Outlook are unique. So if we filter based on the name, it means ideally only one item should be returned. So using that assumption, we know that the first item returned in the get list of folders is indeed the folder we are looking for. So with this, we get the parent ID from that response. Then we set it into the parent folder ID variable we initialized in the very beginning. So this branch is the true branch if a folder exists. Now, if the parent folder does not exist, so in this case, the check if folder exists condition will be equal to 0. Now, if it's equal to 0, the first thing we need to do is we need to create this folder. So this is the request we're going to use to create the folder. We set the is hidden flag to be false and the display name to be the name of the parent folder we wanted to. So this is the request we use to create the parent folder. We set the is hidden flag to be false, and then we set the display name to be equal to the folder name we created in the compose, which is this. So once we do that, we pass the JSON from the response we got from the create parent folder. Then whatever ID we get, we set it also into the parent folder ID variable we initialized in the beginning. So this is simply the scope on creating the parent folder or the main folder. To get the list of the subfolders the names of the subfolders we want to create in Outlook. And just like I said earlier, we already have a table in Excel, and the names are in that table. So we get the list of the names, and then we pass it in here. One reason why I structured the flow in this manner with various scopes is to enable interchangeability, where I can substitute a scope with another scope. So in this case, we are getting the list of the subfolders from Excel. So in case we need to probably switch it to a different method, probably we need to get the list from an email, or we need to get the list from from any other input, any other sort of input. All we just need to do is just change this part, and it will still be able to work as expected in the flows. So we can see here, once we get the list from Excel, we then pass in the list. So in the scope to create these subfolders, we are going to have to look through all the items in that list. And if we compose the subfolder name, then we check if that particular subfolder we want to create already exists. And the way we do that is similar to what we did while we were checking if the parent folder existed. So in this case, we're going to be sending the request to this endpoint where we set the parent folder ID here, and we filter based on the subfolder name. So what we have created here in the compose. So we set it as the filter by display name, which is equal to this. Then one other thing we need to do is we need to set the is hidden folders flag to be true. Now, what this does is it also checks it enables this endpoint to check for both hidden and unhidden folders. So there could be an instance where the subfolder we are trying to create has already been created, but is hidden from the UI. So if it still tries to create the folder while it is hidden, it's going to throw an error. So once we set the is hidden folder to be, that's include hidden folders, it basically checks all folders that are in that main folder or in that parent folder, whether it's hidden or not. So once we do that, same thing, we use a condition to check if the folder exists or not. But in this case, since we are not making use of any of them, or since we're not making use of the folders, like we're not creating any more subfolders, nothing needs to be set in the true value. So if that subfolder exists, if it's true, it just skips it and goes to the next item. But if it is not true, that is, if the subfolder does not exist, then it creates the subfolder using this particular request, similar to what we did in the previous video. So we set the display name as what we got from the compose, then the is hidden to be false, then we set the parent ID here. So let's test this and see. First of all, so this is my Outlook. This is my Outlook UI. So I'm just going to test. Okay, so it's running now. So you can see the test folder has been created and the 10 subfolders have also been created. I'm going to delete, let me delete a couple of folders. So I've deleted 4 folders, folder 4, folder 6, folder 8, and folder 7. So we are going to run this just to see what will happen if the parent folder exists and some folders already exist. What will happen to the rest? So if we test this and run, so you can see the folders were created again. And if you see how it looks like in the flow, so if we see how it looks like in the flow, so remember folder 1 existed, so it was not created, it skipped. So if we check folder 2, same thing with folder 2, it existed. Folder 3 also existed, so it was not created. Folder 4, however, was created because we deleted it earlier. Folder 5 too was skipped. Folder 6 was created. Folder 7 also was created. Same with folder 8. Now folder 9 and 10 existed, so they will be skipped. So essentially, this is how to create such a process where we have a list of folders that we need to create coming in as a requirement. So if you have more questions, more flows you would like to see me build, you can make a comment on any of my YouTube videos, or you can reach out to me via email or LinkedIn.